The stories on this channel are completely fictionalized, and the human videos are AI generated. Read disclaimer carefully. Check your car. Now, Tom's text read, cold and sharp. My stomach dropped. I glanced outside. The passenger door hung slightly open. Game night's laughter faded. Something was wrong. Before we dive in, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're listening from. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, cutting through the chatter. I was mid-laugh, holding a card, pretending I cared about winning. Family game night was a ritual, one I'd grown to tolerate more than enjoy. Laura, my wife, sat to my left, her smile warm but tired. My parents, John and Linda, were across from us, bickering over the rules like they always did. Tom, my younger brother, sprawled on the couch, his grin too wide, like he was in on a joke no one else got. The living room smelled of popcorn and coffee, the kind of cozy you'd see in a holiday movie. But cozy doesn't mean safe. I picked up my phone, expecting a meme or some dumb quip from Tom. Instead, the words hit me like a slap. Check your car. Now. I froze, my thumb hovering over the screen. Tom was right there, 10 feet away, staring at his own cards, acting like he hadn't just sent me a bomb. I looked at him, but he didn't meet my eyes. His fingers tapped his knee, a nervous habit I hadn't seen in years. I forced a chuckle, muttered something about needing air, and stood. Laura raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. She knew me well enough to sense when I was rattled, but she also knew I'd brush it off. That's what I did. Kept things steady. Always had. Outside, the night was crisp, the kind of autumn chill that makes your breath catch. My car, a beat-up sedan I'd had since grad school, sat in the driveway under a street light. Nothing looked off at first. The windows were intact, the tires fine. Then I saw it, the passenger door, just slightly ajar, like someone had tried to close it but didn't quite commit. My heart kicked up a notch. No one had been outside all night. At least, no one I knew of. I circled the car, my shoes crunching on gravel. The air felt heavier now, like it was holding its breath. I checked the locks, the trunk, even under the chassis, half expecting to find something dramatic like a slashed tire or a brick through the windshield. Nothing, just that door, open like a taunt. I shut it, the click too loud in the quiet. My mind raced. Was this Tom's idea of a prank? He'd pulled stunts before, but this felt different. Sharper, meaner. I leaned against the car, staring back at the house. The living room window glowed, framing Laura's silhouette as she shuffled cards. She looked so normal. So unaware. I envied her for a second. My phone buzzed again, but it was just a low battery warning. Tom hadn't followed up. No explanation, no smirk. Just silence. I thought back to when we were kids, Tom and me. He was always the wild one, the one who'd climb too high, run too fast, break things just to see how they'd shatter. I was the one who cleaned up after him, like the time he was 12 and swiped Dad's old pocket knife. Carved his initials into the neighbor's fence. I took the blame, said it was me, because I knew Dad would go easier on me. Tom never thanked me, just grinned like he'd won something. That grin was back tonight, but it wasn't playful. It was guarded, like he was waiting for me to move first. We'd been close once, or as close as brothers with 4 years between them could be. I'd drive him to soccer practice, help with his homework, even lie for him when he snuck out. But there was always this edge to Tom. This hunger for something I couldn't name. Money, maybe. Attention. Control. He'd borrow cash and never pay it back. Make promises he'd break without blinking. I'd let it slide, because that's what family does, right? You forgive. You fix. But standing by my car, that open door staring back at me, I wondered if I'd been fixing the wrong things all along. I glanced at the house again. Mom was laughing, probably at one of Dad's bad puns. Laura was dealing cards, her hands steady. Tom was still on the couch, but now he was watching me through the window. Not obvious, just a flick of his eyes. Enough to make my skin crawl. What was he playing at? And why the car? If he wanted to mess with me, he could have just said something. We were in the same room, for God's sake. I rubbed my hands together, trying to shake the chill. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe the door wasn't even locked properly and the wind nudged it open. But I didn't believe that, not with Tom's text burning a hole in my pocket. I thought about confronting him right then, dragging him outside, demanding answers. But that wasn't me. I don't make scenes. I think things through, weigh the options, keep the peace. Nora always said I overthink everything, and she's probably right. But overthinking didn't explain why my pulse wouldn't slow down. I walked back toward the house, each step heavier than the last. The game night felt like a stage now, everyone playing their parts. Mom with her forced cheer, Dad with his distractions, Laura with her quiet patience, and Tom with that damn grin. I wanted to believe it was just a bad joke, but the air felt wrong, like the moment before a storm breaks. I reached for the front door, my hand pausing on the knob. Something was waiting for me inside. I didn't know what, but I felt it. My breath caught as I stood by the car, the open passenger door like a question I couldn't answer. The night air pressed against me, cold and heavy, as I leaned closer to inspect the interior. Nothing looked out of place. The seats were empty, the glove compartment shut, my old coffee cup still in the center console. But there was a smell, faint and wrong, like cheap cologne or cleaning fluid, something that didn't belong in my car. I sniffed again, trying to place it, but it was gone as fast as it came. My fingers tightened around my phone, Tom's text still glowing in my mind. What was he trying to pull? I opened the door wider, half expecting something to fall out. A note, a clue, anything to make sense of this. Nothing. I checked the floor mats, the seat crevices, even the trunk again. Clean. Too clean, maybe. I don't vacuum my car often, but there wasn't a speck of dirt. It felt staged, like someone had been here and covered their tracks. My stomach twisted. I wasn't a paranoid guy, but this wasn't right. I shut the door, the thud echoing in the quiet driveway. The streetlight flickered, casting long shadows that made the car look like it was holding its breath. In the aftermath, 8 dead Army sergeants. Jimmy Harshaw's face froze. A small tear rolled and looked down. I leaned against the hood, trying to think. Tom had always been the reckless one, the one who acted first and thought later. I was the opposite, the one who cleaned up his messes, who made sure the family stayed glued together, like when we were kids, maybe 16 and 12, and Tom decided to borrow Dad's car for a joyride. He didn't even have a permit. I found him in the garage, engine running, his hands shaking on the wheel. He looked at me, not with guilt, but with that same grin he had tonight, like he was daring me to stop him. I didn't. I climbed in, told him to drive slow, and prayed we wouldn't crash. We didn't, but he clipped a mailbox, left a dent Dad noticed the next day. I said it was me. Took the grounding, the lectures, the disappointed looks. Tom just shrugged and moved on. That was us, him breaking things, me fixing them. But this, tonight, felt different. Not a prank, not a joyride. There was no thrill in Tom's text, no mischief. Just those 3 words, cold and urgent. I glanced back at the house. The living room window glowed, but the silhouettes inside looked wrong now, like actors in a play I didn't understand. Laura was still dealing cards, her movements mechanical. Mom and Dad were talking, their heads too close together. And Tom, he wasn't even pretending to play anymore. He was just sitting there, one hand in his pocket, the other tapping that same nervous rhythm. I rubbed my face, trying to shake the unease. Maybe I was overthinking it. Laura always said I built mountains out of molehills, saw problems where there weren't any. But that smell in the car, that open door, they weren't nothing. I thought about texting Tom back, demanding he explain himself. But what would I even say? Why'd you mess with my car? He'd laugh it off, or worse, he'd lie. He was good at that, always had been. Better than me, anyway. I remembered another time, years ago, when Tom's lies cut deeper. I was in college, home for the weekend, when I found him in my room, rifling through my desk. He said he was looking for a pen, but I saw the envelope in his hand. Cash I'd saved for textbooks. He swore he wasn't stealing, just checking it out. I believed him, or wanted to. A week later, the money was gone, and he had a new jacket. I didn't confront him, didn't tell Mom or Dad. I just bought used books and let it go. That's what I did back then, let things go. But standing by my car, that old anger bubbled up. I wasn't a kid anymore. I didn't have to clean up his messes. I walked back to the house, my steps slow, deliberate. The front door creaked as I opened it, and the warmth of the living room hit me like a wall. Everyone looked up, their smiles too quick, too tight. Laura asked if I was okay, her voice soft but sharp, like she already knew the answer. I nodded, forcing a grin of my own. "Just needed some air," I said, my eyes on Tom. He didn't look up, just kept shuffling his cards, but his fingers were moving too fast, like he was trying to outrun something. I sat down, the game resuming around me, but it felt like a charade now. Mom was talking about her garden, Dad was complaining about work, but their voices sounded hollow, like they were filling the silence to keep something else out. Laura touched my hand under the table, her fingers cold. I wanted to ask her if she'd seen anything, if she knew why Tom was acting so strange, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I watched Tom, waiting for him to slip, to give me something I could grab onto. He didn't. He played his turn, laughed at Dad's joke, acted like everything was fine. But I saw it, the way his eyes flicked to the corner of the room, to the duffel bag by the couch. It was his, I realized, not mine or Laura's. Just sitting there, unassuming, but it felt like it was watching me back. I didn't say anything, not yet, but I knew I'd have to open that bag. Tom's grin was too sharp, like he was chewing on a secret. I slid back into my seat, the warmth of the living room doing nothing to ease the chill in my bones. The game went on, cards slapping the table, but it felt like we were all playing pretend. Laura's laugh was too loud, like she was trying to drown something out. Mom kept her eyes on her cards, avoiding mine. Dad's jokes landed flat, his voice tight, like he was reading from a script. And Tom, he was the worst of them, his glances darting to me, then away, quick as a flinch. I tried to focus on the game, but my hands moved on autopilot. Laura dealt the next round, her fingers trembling just enough for me to notice. She caught my eye, offered a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. I wanted to grab her hand, ask her what was wrong, but the table felt like a minefield. One wrong move and something would explode. I glanced at the duffel bag in the corner, still there, still silent, but it loomed like a storm cloud. Tom's bag. I was sure of it now. I pulled out my phone under the table, my thumb hovering over Tom's name. I typed, "What's going on? Talk to me." Sent. The message marked as delivered, but no dots appeared. No reply. Just like Tom, always dodging when it mattered. I stared at him, willing him to look up, to give me something. He didn't. He just played a card, made some quip about winning, and leaned back like he owned the room. But his foot was tapping now, faster than before, a rhythm that screamed he was hiding something. My mind drifted to a night years ago, when I was 25, Tom barely out of high school. We were at Mom and Dad's old place, the one with the creaky porch. They'd called us over to talk about Grandpa's will, a messy thing that had torn everyone apart. Grandpa had left most of his savings to charity, a fact that hit Tom like a punch. He'd expected a windfall, something to set him up. Instead, he got a few old books and a watch. That night, he'd stormed into the kitchen, yelling about how it wasn't fair, how Grandpa owed him. I'd tried to calm him down, but he shoved past me, his face red, his voice bitter. "You don't get it, Mike," he'd said. "You're always the good one. You don't need this." I didn't know what he meant then, but it stuck with me, that edge in his voice, like I'd betrayed him just by existing. Mom had stayed quiet that night, her hands folded in her lap while Dad changed the subject. They didn't want to deal with Tom's anger, so I did. Like always, I took him outside, let him vent, promised to help him figure things out. He didn't thank me, just walked away, leaving me to clean up the mess. That was the first time I felt it, that weight of being the one who holds it together. I'd carried it ever since. Now, sitting at the game table, that weight was heavier. I watched Mom rearrange her cards for the third time, her fingers nervous. Dad kept glancing at the clock, like he was waiting for an escape. Laura was still smiling, but it was brittle, like glass about to crack. And Tom, he was too calm now, his grin gone, replaced by a blank stare that made my skin crawl. I wanted to shake him, demand why he'd sent that text, why he'd pointed me to the car, but I didn't. Not yet. I was still the good one, the one who waited, who thought things through. I caught Laura's eye again, searching for a clue. She looked away, too fast, her hands fumbling with the deck. Was she hiding something too? The thought hit me hard, like a betrayal I hadn't seen coming. Laura had always been my anchor, the one who saw through the family drama, who called Tom out when I wouldn't. But tonight she was off, her cheer forced, her silence loud. I wanted to believe it was just the weirdness of the night, but doubt crept in, cold and sharp. I checked my phone again. Still no reply from Tom. I typed another message, "What's in the bag?" but hesitated, my thumb hovering over send. If I pushed too hard, he'd shut down, or worse, make a scene. I deleted the text, shoved the phone in my pocket. The game dragged on, the air thick with things unsaid. Mom laughed at something Dad said, but it sounded hollow, like she was trying to convince herself everything was fine. Dad's eyes kept flicking to Tom, then away, like he was afraid to linger. I leaned back, my gaze drifting to the duffel bag again. It sat there, unassuming, but it felt alive, like it was waiting for me to make a move. I thought about Grandpa's will again, about Tom's anger, about the secrets that night had buried. Something told me that bag held answers, or at least pieces of them. I just wasn't sure I wanted to know. Then my phone buzzed, sharp and sudden, under the table. Not Tom's name this time. An unknown number. The text from the unknown number glowed on my screen. "You should have asked about Grandpa's letter." My chest tightened, the words slicing through the haze of the game night. I knew that tone, that vague menace, like a memory I'd tried to bury. The living room's warmth felt suffocating now, the card game a flimsy mask for whatever was unraveling. I kept my phone low, out of sight, my eyes flicking to Tom. He was still playing his part, tossing a card onto the pile, but his jaw was tight, like he sensed the shift in the air. The mention of Grandpa's letter hit hard. I hadn't thought about it in years, not since that ugly night after his funeral. I was 25, just starting my life with Laura, when the family gathered to hear the will. Grandpa had been the glue, the one who held us together, with his quiet wisdom and bad jokes. We expected a simple split of his savings, maybe some keepsakes. Instead, the lawyer read out that most of it, his house, his savings, went to a local charity for veterans. Tom lost it. He stood up, chair scraping, and yelled that Grandpa had promised him something, anything, to get him out of the hole he was in. Debt, I found out later. Gambling, maybe. He never said. I just sat there, silent, while Mom cried and Dad tried to calm him down. I didn't speak up, didn't ask why Tom thought he was owed anything. I let it slide, like always. And that silence felt like a stone in my gut now. I glanced at the duffel bag in the corner, its dark canvas catching the lamplight. It didn't belong here, not with Mom's neat cushions or Dad's cluttered bookshelves. It was Tom's, I was sure, but why leave it there, so obvious? It felt like a dare, like he wanted me to notice. My fingers itched to grab it, to rip it open and see what he was hiding, but Laura's forced laugh pulled me back. She was watching me now, her eyes sharp, like she knew I was spiraling. I wanted to ask her if she'd seen anything, if she knew why that text felt like a ghost from our past, but the words wouldn't come. I typed a reply to the unknown number, "Who is this?" but hesitated. What if it was Tom messing with me from another phone? Or someone else, someone who knew too much? I deleted the message, my hands clammy. The game went on, cards flipping, voices overlapping, but it was all noise now. Mom was talking about her garden again, her voice too high, like she was trying to fill the silence. Dad's laugh was hollow, his eyes darting to the bag, then away. Tom was quiet, too quiet, his fingers no longer tapping. He was waiting, I realized, for me to make a move. I thought back to that night with the will again. After Tom's outburst, I'd found him outside, smoking in the dark. He didn't look at me, just said, "You don't know what it's like, Mike, to need something and get nothing." I didn't argue, didn't ask what he meant. I just stood there like a coward letting him stew. I told myself it was because I didn't want to fight, but really I was afraid of what he'd say, afraid of what I'd have to admit, that I'd always been the one who got the easy path, the one who didn't need to beg, Tom never forgave me for that, I think. Not really. Now, that bag felt like a piece of that night, a leftover grudge Tom had carried all these years. I couldn't shake the feeling that it held something tied to Grandpa, something Tom hadn't let go. My guilt gnawed at me, sharper now. I should have spoken up back then, asked questions, pushed back. Instead, I'd played the good son, the fixer, and let Tom's anger fester. What had that cost us? What was it costing us now? I shifted in my seat, my eyes locked on the bag. Laura's hand brushed mine under the table. A warning or a comfort, I couldn't tell. Her smile was gone, replaced by a look I didn't recognize. Fear, maybe? Or resignation. I wanted to ask her everything, but Tom's gaze flicked to me, quick and cold, like he was daring me to act. I didn't. Not yet. But I knew I couldn't ignore that bag much longer. I stood, mumbling about getting water, and moved toward the corner. My heart pounded, each step louder in my head. The bag was right there, unzipped just enough to show a glimpse of papers inside. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the canvas. Laura's voice cut through the room. Mike, don't. Laura's voice was a blade, sharp and sudden, stopping my hand an inch from the duffel bag. Her eyes were wide, not with anger, but something closer to panic, compunction, like she was pleading with me to stop. I froze, my fingers still brushing the canvas, the room's chatter fading to a hum. The bag sat there, heavy with secrets, but Laura's stare held me tighter than its weight. I pulled my hand back, not because I wanted to, but because her tone shook me. She didn't move, just watched me, her face pale under the lamplight. I sat back down, my heart thudding. The game went on, Mom tossing a card with a forced giggle, Dad muttering about the score. Tom's eyes flicked to me, then away, his face unreadable. Laura's foot nudged mine under the table, a silent question, but I couldn't look at her. My mind was spinning. Why was she so quick to stop me? What did she know? I thought about our marriage, the way it had bent under the weight of my family. Laura was the one who saw through their chaos, who called me out for always playing the fixer. I remembered a night 2 years ago, after another family dinner went sour. Tom had shown up late, smelling of smoke and excuses, asking for a loan. I gave it to him, like always. Later, in bed, Laura turned to me, her voice quiet but firm. He's using you, Mike. You keep saving him, and he keeps taking. I brushed it off, said she didn't understand family. She went silent, and that silence hurt more than the fight. I'd spent years choosing them over her, thinking it was my job to hold everyone together. Now, her reaction to the bag made me wonder what I'd missed. I glanced at the bag again, its zipper glinting like a smirk. It wasn't just Tom's secret, I realized. Laura's fear meant she was part of this too, or at least suspected something. The thought stung, a betrayal I hadn't seen coming. I trusted her, always had. But trust is a fragile thing, and mine was cracking. And mine was cracking. I trusted her. It was half her fault. I could tell. My brain was racing, and mine was I leaned toward Tom, keeping my voice low. What's in the bag, Tom? He didn't look up, just flipped a card onto the pile. What? He said, too casual, like I had asked about the weather. I pressed harder, my voice a whisper. You know what? The car, the text, now this? What's going on? His eyes met mine, cold and steady, like he was sizing me up. You're paranoid, Mike, he said, but his hand twitched, betraying him. I wanted to push, to demand answers, but Mom's laugh cut through, too loud, pulling us back to the game. Laura's hand found mine under the table, squeezing hard. I looked at her, searching for an explanation, but her face was a mask, her lips tight. I thought about that night again, her warning about Tom. She'd said he was trouble, that he'd drag me down if I let him. I'd laughed, called her dramatic. Now I wasn't so sure. If you're hooked so far, hit like and subscribe for more stories like this. I played a card, my mind elsewhere. The bag felt like it was staring at me, daring me to act. I couldn't let it go, not after the car, the text, Laura's reaction. Tom was deflecting, but I knew him too well. He was hiding something, and it wasn't small. I thought about Grandpa's will, the way Tom's anger had lingered, a wound that never healed. Was that what this was about? Some old grudge he'd carried all these years? I leaned toward Tom again, my voice barely a breath. I'm not letting this go. What's in there? He smirked, but it was weak, like he was running out of tricks. You always have to play hero, don't you? He said, his tone biting. I felt the room shrink, the air thick with his words. Laura's grip on my hand tightened, but she didn't speak. Mom and Dad kept playing, oblivious or pretending to be. I couldn't tell anymore. I thought about Laura's warning from that night 2 years ago. She'd seen Tom for what he was, a user, a charmer who took more than he gave. I'd defended him, said he was family, that he'd change, but he hadn't, and now Laura's silence felt like a lie, like she'd known something all along and let me walk into it blind. I wanted to be angry, but the guilt was stronger. I'd ignored her, chosen Tom, chosen family. What had that cost us? I stared at the bag, its presence louder than the game. I could feel Tom watching me, waiting for my next move. I wasn't the kid who took the blame anymore, not the one who fixed his messes. But I wasn't ready to open that bag, not with everyone watching. I needed answers, but I needed them on my terms. Tom leaned back, his eyes locked on mine. You sure you want to know, Mike? I unzipped the duffel bag, the sound slicing through the room's false cheer. My hand shook as I pulled the canvas apart, revealing a mess of papers and photos stuffed inside. The game night noise, Mom's laugh, Dad's grumbling, Laura's forced chatter, faded to a dull roar. I was alone with the bag now, its contents a Pandora's box I couldn't unopen. I glanced at Tom, expecting a reaction, but he just stared at his cards, his face blank, like he'd been waiting for this. I pulled out a stack of documents first, old, yellowed, some with creases so deep they nearly tore, deeds, bank statements, a notarized letter, all tied to Grandpa's estate. My breath caught. These weren't random papers. They were pieces of a life we'd buried. A photo slipped out, landing on the floor. It was Grandpa, smiling in his old fishing hat, standing by the house he'd left to charity. But there was another paper clipped to it, a handwritten note in his scrawl. For Michael, when he's ready. My chest tightened. I hadn't seen his handwriting in years, and now it felt like he was speaking to me right here in this room. I sifted through more papers, my hands moving faster. A bank transfer receipt, dated a year after Grandpa's death, caught my eye. Money moved to an account I didn't recognize, but Tom's name was on it. Thousands of dollars. My stomach churned. Tom had always been desperate for cash, ever since he was a teenager, blowing through paychecks on bets, cars, things he couldn't keep. I remembered a summer when he was 19, crashing at my apartment, promising to pay me back for rent. He never did. Instead, he'd vanish for days, come back with excuses and that same grin. I'd let it go, told myself he'd grow out of it. But this was different. This was a scheme, deliberate and cold. I looked at Laura, her face pale, her eyes fixed on the table. She hadn't said a word since stopping me earlier, but her silence screamed now. Did she know about this? She'd warned me about Tom before, called him a leech, but never with details, never with proof. I thought of the nights she'd go quiet when I mentioned him, the way she'd change the subject when I defended him. Had she seen something I hadn't, owned something and kept it from me? The thought cut deeper than Tom's betrayal. Laura was my anchor, the one I trusted when the family's chaos threatened to pull me under. If she'd held back, if she'd let me walk into this blind, what did that mean for us? I dug deeper into the bag, finding more photos. One showed Tom at Grandpa's house, the one we'd lost to the charity. He was younger, maybe 20, standing by the porch with a look I didn't recognize. Anger, maybe, or hunger? Another document caught my eye, a letter from a lawyer, not the one who read the will. It mentioned a contested asset and Tom's signature at the bottom. I didn't understand the legal jargon, but the pieces were falling into place. Tom hadn't just been mad about the will. He'd done something about it. Something he'd kept from me, from all of us. I thought back to those years after Grandpa's death. Tom's visits got shorter, his calls less frequent. He'd show up with new clothes, a new phone, always dodging questions about where the money came from. I'd assumed he'd gotten a job, maybe lucked into something. I never asked. I never wanted to know. That was my mistake, wasn't it? Always looking the other way, cleaning up his messes, thinking it was love. Now, holding these papers, I saw it for what it was. Complicity. I'd enabled him, let him slide, and now we were here. I glanced at Tom again. He was watching me now, his eyes narrow, like he was calculating his next move. I wanted to shove the papers in his face, demand answers, but the room felt too small, the air too thick. Mom was still talking, oblivious, her voice a nervous hum. Dad's eyes flicked to the bag, then away, like he sensed trouble but didn't want to face it. Laura's silence was the loudest, though. She wasn't looking at me, just staring at her hands, her knuckles white. I wanted to believe she was just scared, caught off guard like me, but doubt gnawed at me. What did she know, and why hadn't she told me? I stuffed the papers back into the bag, my hands clumsy. I couldn't do this here, not with everyone pretending nothing was wrong. But I couldn't let it go either. Tom's scheme, whatever it was, had been sitting in this bag, in this room, all night. And I'd almost missed it. Almost played the good brother again, the one who fixes everything. Not this time. I stood, the chair scraping loud enough to make Mom flinch. "I need some air," I said, my voice steady but sharp. Laura looked up, her eyes pleading, but I didn't stop. Tom's gaze followed me, cold and unblinking. I grabbed the bag, its weight heavier than it should have been, and headed for the door. Then I saw it, tucked inside the bag's inner pocket. A letter with my name on it. The letter in Grandpa's handwriting said I was meant to inherit a trust fund, one Tom had buried. I stood frozen by the door, the duffel bag heavy in my hand, its papers spilling secrets I wasn't ready for. The living room's chatter, Mom's nervous laugh, Dad's forced jokes, felt like a distant hum, a world I no longer belonged to. My eyes traced the words again, Grandpa's familiar scrawl, dated a year after his death. Impossible, yet there it was, naming me as the beneficiary of a fund I'd never heard of. $50,000, set aside for my future, hidden, stolen. I clutched the letter, my thumb smudging the ink. Tom's name was scrawled on another document in the bag, tied to a bank account that matched the fund's transfer. He'd taken it, or redirected it, or worse. My brother, the one I'd covered for, lied for, all these years. I thought of the times I'd sacrificed for him, for all of them. Like when I was 22, working 2 jobs to help Mom and Dad keep the house after Dad's layoff. I'd skip meals, skip sleep, tell myself it was temporary. Tom was off at college then, blowing his scholarship on late-night bets, calling me when he was broke. I sent him money every time, because that's what family does. I never asked for it back. Never asked for anything. I turned back to the room, the letter burning in my hand. Tom was watching me, his face a mask of calm, but his eyes were sharp, like he knew the ground was shifting. Laura sat rigid, her hands folded too tightly. Mom and Dad were still playing, but their movements were mechanical, like they sensed the air turning sour. I couldn't sit back down, couldn't pretend any more. The bag hit the floor with a thud, papers spilling out. "What is this, Tom?" I said, my voice low but hard, holding up the letter. He didn't flinch, just leaned back, his fingers drumming on the table. "You're making a scene, Mike," he said, like I was the one out of line. That grin, the one I'd seen 1,000 times, flickered, but didn't break. I wanted to shake him, make him admit it, but I turned to Mom and Dad instead. "Did you know?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Did you know about this trust fund?" Mom's face crumpled, her cards dropping to the table. Dad looked away, his jaw tight. Mike, it's complicated, Mom started, her voice barely a whisper. We didn't know everything, just rumors. Your grandfather mentioned something, but we thought it was settled. Settled. The word hit like a slap. They'd heard whispers of a fund meant for me and did nothing, asked nothing. Let Tom, or someone, sweep it away. I thought back to another moment years ago when I'd sacrificed again. I was 28, engaged to Laura, saving for a ring. Tom showed up, strung out, begging for cash to fix a mistake. I gave him my savings, every cent, because he was crying, because he was my brother. Laura didn't know. I told her I'd lost the money in a bad investment, too ashamed to admit I'd bailed him out again. She believed me. Or pretended to. That lie sat between us, a crack I ignored. Now, holding this letter, I saw those cracks everywhere. In Mom's averted eyes, in Dad's silence, in Tom's smug calm. You knew, I said to Mom, my voice steadier now. You both knew something and let it go. Dad finally looked at me, his face heavy. We didn't want to stir things up, Mike. You were doing fine. Tom? He needed help. Needed help. The same excuse I'd used for years. I felt sick, not just at them, but at myself. I'd been complicit too, always smoothing things over, always the good son. And for what? To stand here, holding proof that my family had let me down? I turned to Tom, the letter trembling in my hand. You took it, I said, not a question. You found out about the fund and took it. He shrugged, a small, careless move that made my blood boil. You didn't need it, Mike, he said. You always land on your feet. His voice was smooth, like he'd rehearsed it, like he believed it justified everything. I wanted to hate him, but the hurt was deeper, a wound that had been growing for years. I thought of Grandpa, the way he'd pull me aside as a kid, tell me I was steady, reliable, that I'd do big things. I'd believed him, carried that pride like a shield. Now I saw it differently. My steadiness had been a leash, keeping me tied to a family that took it for granted. Mom's eyes were wet, but she didn't speak. Dad just stared at the table. Laura was silent, her face unreadable, and that hurt worst of all. I'd trusted her to see through this, to warn me, but she'd stayed quiet. Had she known about the fund? Or was she just protecting me from Tom's mess, like always? My trust in them, Mom, Dad, Tom, even Laura, was crumbling, piece by piece. I'd spent my life building a family that didn't exist, not the way I thought. The letter felt heavier now, not just paper, but a truth I couldn't unlearn. I wanted to walk away, leave the bag, the letter, the whole damn night behind. But I couldn't. Not yet. I looked at Laura, waiting for her to say something, anything. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw fear. Laura's voice broke the silence, soft but steady. I knew Tom was up to something, Mike, but I didn't know it was this. Her words hit me like a quiet explosion, unraveling the fragile trust I'd been clinging to. The living room felt smaller, the air thick with the weight of her confession. The letter from Grandpa, still in my hand, felt like a prop now, secondary to the betrayal in Laura's eyes. She looked at me, not with guilt, but with a desperate kind of love, like she was begging me to understand. I stared at her, my heart caught between anger and ache. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice low, barely holding together. She swallowed, her hands twisting in her lap. I wanted to protect you, she said. You always carry them, Mike. I thought, if I said something, it'd break you. Protect me. The words stung, not because they were wrong, but because they were true. I'd always been the one to carry the family, to fix their messes. Laura had seen it, tried to shield me, but her silence felt like a lie all the same. I thought back to a moment a year ago, after another family dinner turned sour. Tom had been dodging questions about a new car, one he couldn't afford. Laura pulled me aside in the kitchen, her voice sharp. He's playing you, Mike. He's always playing you. Stop letting him. I'd brushed it off, told her she was overreacting. Family's complicated, I said. She didn't argue, just went quiet, her eyes heavy with something I didn't want to see. Warning. She'd tried to warn me and I'd ignored her, too loyal to Tom, too stubborn to listen. Now that memory burned. She'd seen his edges, his schemes, and I'd dismissed her. What else had I missed? I looked at her now, her face pale, her eyes wet but unyielding. I wanted to be furious, to shout that her silence had let this happen, let Tom steal from me, from Grandpa's memory, but I couldn't. I loved her too much, and that love was a knot, tying my anger to my guilt. She'd stayed quiet to keep me from breaking, but it had broken something else, us, maybe, or the version of us I'd believed in. I didn't know how to fix that. Tom shifted in his seat, his charm slipping back on like a mask. "Come on, Mike," he said, his voice smooth, almost playful. "You're blowing this out of proportion." That grin, the one that had always gotten him out of trouble, was back, but it was different now, sharper, like a blade hidden in velvet. I saw it then, the darker intent behind his ease, the way he watched me. Not as a brother, but as a threat. He wasn't just deflecting, he was calculating, waiting for me to back down like I always had. But I wasn't that kid anymore, the one who took the blame, who cleaned up his messes. I thought of another time, years back, when Laura had warned me again. We were newly married, living in a cramped apartment, barely scraping by. Tom showed up, needing a place to crash after a rough patch. Laura didn't trust him, said he was using us. I let him stay anyway, gave him my couch, my groceries, my patience. One night, I caught him going through my desk looking for cash. He laughed it off, said he was just curious. Laura didn't buy it. She waited until he left, then told me, "He'll take everything if you let him." I didn't listen. I told myself it was just Tom being Tom. Now holding that letter, I saw her clarity, her strength, and my own blindness. Mom and Dad were silent, their eyes on the table, like they could avoid this if they tried hard enough. I wanted to scream at them, at Laura, at Tom, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I felt the weight of all those years, all those sacrifices, pressing down. I'd given up so much for this family, for Tom, and now I was standing in a room full of people who'd let me down. Laura's confession wasn't just about Tom, it was about me, about how I'd let her warnings slide, how I'd chosen loyalty to them over trust in her. Tom leaned forward, his voice low, teasing. "You're not going to do anything stupid, are you, Mike?" His eyes were cold, his charm a thin veneer over something uglier. I saw it now, the threat beneath his words, the way he'd always manipulated, always taken. My hands clenched around the letter, Grandpa's words a reminder of what I'd lost. Not just money, but time, trust, pieces of myself. Laura reached for my hand, her touch tentative. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold on either. I was caught, torn between the love I had for her and the anger at her silence. She'd tried to protect me, but it felt like betrayal anyway. I didn't know how to reconcile that, not yet. I looked at Tom, his grin fading, his eyes locked on mine. He knew I was done playing his game. I stood, the letter still in my hand, and nodded toward the door. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. "Now." Tom's smile didn't waver, but his eyes did. Tom's grin vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stare as we stepped into the dim hallway. The living room's noise, Mom's nervous chatter, Dad's forced cough, faded behind the closed door, leaving just me, Tom, and the letter in my hand. The air was heavy, like the moment before a fight you know you can't avoid. I held up the letter, Grandpa's handwriting a silent accusation. "Explain this," I said, my voice low but firm, no room for his usual dodge. Tom leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, like he was bored. "You're making this bigger than it is, Mike," he said. But his voice had an edge, sharp and defensive. "Grandpa's money? It was never yours. He promised me something, and I took what I was owed. Owed." The word hit like a punch, twisting the knife of his betrayal. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. For the first time, I saw him clearly. Not my little brother, not the kid I'd protected, but a man who'd built his life on taking what wasn't his. It's hard to imagine, but when you watch Old, what does the story of his transhumanism have to do with aliens? I thought about our lifelong dynamic, the push and pull that had defined us. I was the steady one, the one who picked up the pieces when Tom broke things. Like when I was 19, home from college, and found him in the backyard, smashing bottles against the fence. He was 16, angry at Dad for grounding him, angry at the world for reasons he wouldn't share. I didn't yell, didn't tell Mom. I just cleaned up the glass, told him to cool off. Later, he stole my car keys, took a joyride, and dented the fender. I covered for him, said it was my fault. He didn't thank me, just gave me that grin, like I'd passed some test. That moment stuck with me, the first crack in my trust. But I'd ignored it, told myself it was just Tom being Tom. Now, standing in this hallway, I saw it for what it was. Selfishness, plain and brutal. "You think you were owed this?" I asked, shaking the letter. "You hid a trust fund meant for me. You lied to everyone." My voice was steady, but inside I was unraveling. I'd spent years making excuses for him, believing he'd change, that family meant loyalty no matter what. Tom's eyes narrowed, his calm cracking. "You don't get it, Mike," he said, stepping closer. "You always had it easy. Good grades, good job. Laura, I had to fight for everything. That money, it was my chance." His chance? I almost laughed, the kind of bitter laugh that hurts. Your chance to what? Screw me over? Screw Grandpa's memory? I stepped toward him, closing the gap. He didn't back down, but his hands twitched, like he was itching to push past me. I remembered another time, years later, when I was 27, bailing him out of a bar fight. He'd mouthed off to the wrong guy, got himself bloodied. I drove him home, patched him up, didn't ask questions. Laura had been furious, said I was enabling him. I'd told her it was one time that he'd learn. He didn't. He never did. And I'd kept enabling him, thinking it was love. "Not anymore. I'm done," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "I'm done cleaning up your messes, Tom. You don't get to take from me anymore." The words felt like a release, like I'd finally set down a weight I'd carried too long. His face shifted, a flash of anger, then something else. Fear, maybe, or realization. "You're serious," he said, almost a whisper. "You're actually cutting me off." "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. I'd spent my life being the good brother, the one who forgave, who fixed. But standing there, the letter in my hand, I saw the cost. Not just the money, but the years I'd given him, the trust I'd lost, the strain on my marriage. Laura's warnings, her silence, all came back to me. I'd ignored her, chosen Tom, chosen family. But family wasn't this. Not lies, not theft, not betrayal dressed up as love. Tom laughed, a hollow sound. "You think you're better than me, Mike? You think you're above this?" He gestured at the letter, at the bag behind me. "You're part of this family. You don't get to walk away clean." His words stung because they weren't entirely wrong. I'd been complicit, letting his selfishness slide, letting Mom and Dad look the other way. But I wasn't that person anymore. I'd seen too much. "I'm not walking away clean," I said, my voice low. "But I'm walking away." I stepped back, the letter still in my hand, a reminder of what I'd lost and what I was reclaiming. Tom's charm, his grin, his excuses, they didn't work anymore. I saw him for what he was, a man who'd take until there was nothing left. I wasn't going to let him. He straightened, his eyes cold, like he was sizing me up one last time. "You'll regret this," he said, but there was no heat in it, just a quiet threat. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. For the first time, I felt steady, not because I was fixing anything, but because I was choosing myself. I turned to go back to the living room, to face Laura, Mom, Dad, the mess of it all. But Tom moved first, grabbing the bag from the floor. The silence after Tom grabbed the bag and left was louder than any argument. I stood in the hallway, the letter still in my hand, Grandpa's words a faint echo of a life I'd never claimed. The living room was quiet now, the game abandoned, cards scattered like leaves. Laura sat at the table, her eyes on me, soft but heavy with everything we hadn't said. Mom and Dad were there too, their faces drawn, like they'd aged a decade in one night. I felt the weight of it all, the betrayal, the lies, the years I'd spent holding this family together. But something else stirred inside me, something lighter. A choice. I walked back to the table, the letter crinkling in my fist. Laura stood, her hand reaching for mine, tentative, like she wasn't sure I'd take it. I did, her fingers cold but steady. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I should have told you sooner." I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. Her silence had hurt, but I saw it now, her fear, her love, her attempt to shield me from a truth I wasn't ready for. I was angry, but I loved her more. That was enough to start with. I looked at Mom and Dad, their eyes avoiding mine. "We didn't know how to fix it," Mom said, her voice small. Dad just nodded, his hands clasped too tightly. I wanted to yell, to demand why they'd let Tom's lies fester, why they'd let me carry their burdens. But the words didn't come. They weren't worth it. Not anymore. I'd spent too long trying to fix them, to be the good son, the good brother. I was done. I sat down, Laura beside me, and we talked. Not about the letter, not about Tom, but about us. Our life, our future, the house we'd been saving for, the plans we'd pushed aside for family emergencies, for Tom's messes. Laura's voice was quiet but sure, mapping out a life away from this house, this town, this weight. "We could start over," she said, her eyes searching mine. "Just us." I felt a spark, small but real, of something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. I thought about the trust fund, the $50,000 Tom had stolen or hidden or whatever he'd done. It wasn't mine anymore, maybe never had been, but it was still in my name, still tied to Grandpa's wish for my future. I could fight for it, drag Tom through lawyers, force the truth out, but the thought made me tired. That money was tainted, a chain linking me to his betrayal, to the family's silence. I didn't want it. I wanted something cleaner. The next morning I called the bank. The fund was real, still sitting in an account Tom had rerouted but never fully claimed. I told them to transfer it, every cent, to the veterans' charity Grandpa had loved. The woman on the phone hesitated, asked if I was sure. I was. It wasn't about vengeance, wasn't about proving a point. It was about letting go. Grandpa had wanted me to have a future, and I was claiming one, just not the way he'd planned. Grandpa had wanted me to have a future, and I was claiming one, just not the way he'd planned. Laura and I packed our things that afternoon. Not much, just clothes, a few books, the essentials. Mom and Dad watched from the doorway, their faces a mix of guilt and confusion. "You don't have to leave," Mom said, her voice trembling. But I did. This house, with its creaky floors and heavy memories, wasn't home anymore. It was a place I'd outgrown, a place where I'd lost too much of myself. I thought about the years I'd spent here, the sacrifices I'd made, the time I gave up a promotion to stay close, help Dad after his surgery, the money I lent Tom, knowing I'd never see it again, the nights I lied to Laura, saying everything was fine when it wasn't. I'd thought it was strength, holding everyone together. Now I saw it as weakness, a refusal to choose myself. That ended today. We drove to a motel just for the night to figure out our next step. Laura held my hand as we sat on the lumpy bed, the hum of the highway outside a strange kind of comfort. "Where do we go from here?" she asked, her voice soft but not scared. I didn't have an answer, not a clear one, but that was okay. For the first time, I didn't need to know everything. I just needed to move forward. I thought about Tom, out there with his bag, his schemes, his justifications. I didn't hate him, not really. I pitied him. He'd built a life on taking, on resentment, and it had left him empty. I wouldn't follow him there. I'd spent too long chasing his messes, trying to fix what wasn't mine to fix. Laura's warnings, her clarity, had been right all along. I wished I'd listened sooner. but I was listening now. We talked late into the night, planning a life that was ours. A small apartment, maybe, somewhere new. A job I actually wanted, not one I took to stay close to family. Laura smiled, a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen in months. "We'll be okay," she said, and I believed her. Not because it was easy, but because we were choosing it together. I looked at the letter one last time. Grandpa's words, faded but clear. He'd wanted me to have a future, to be steady but free. I folded it, tucked it into my wallet, not as a keepsake, but as a reminder. I wasn't the good son anymore, not the fixer, not the one who carried everyone else. I was just Mike, and that was enough. We left the motel the next morning, our car packed, the road ahead open. I didn't look back at the house, at the town, at the life I was leaving. I didn't need to. I walked away, and for the first time, I felt free.